Good evening, I'm Britt Clennett in Hong Kong and welcome to View TV News. Coming up on tonight's show. All 9 organisers of Hong Kong's 2014 umbrella protests are found guilty for their role in the civil disobedience movement. Beijing welcomes today's verdict, while democracy activist Joshua Wong says he recognises it as political persecution. And more Hong Kongers are falling victim to scams over popular messaging platform WhatsApp. First up tonight, in a landmark verdict, a Hong Kong court has found leaders of the 2014 Occupy protests guilty of public nuisance charges for their role in the civil disobedience movement. The court has granted them bail and they are due back in court tomorrow to have their pleas heard again. Now, some of the defendants say they will most definitely appeal, no matter what the jail sentencing. Ryan Chang has the details.
Yellow umbrellas and placards demanding universal suffrage appeared outside the West Kowloon Magistrates' Courts today. That's as the judge handed down the verdict in the trial of 9 leaders of Hong Kong's 2014 Occupy Central civil disobedience movement. The protests that called for free elections paralyzed parts of Hong Kong for up to 79 days. All 9 leaders were found guilty of at least one public nuisance offence by the district court. The pro-democracy activists face possible jail sentences of up to 7 years for each charge. Judge Johnny Chan said, while civil disobedience is recognized in Hong Kong, it cannot be used as a defense against criminal charges. In the plea hearing, Chan Kin-man and Benny Tai, 2 co-founders of the Occupy Central campaign, urged the judge not to sentence Reverend Chu Yu-ming to prison.
Chu is a lot older and his health condition is not that good. If I could, I would go to jail in his place.
Meanwhile, lawmakers Tanya Chan and Shiu Ka-chun face being stripped of their LegCo seats, should the legislature choose to remove them. But Shiu said that he will definitely appeal against the verdict and asked the Democratic camp of politicians to guard the key seats that remain in LegCo. Beijing, meanwhile, has shown its firm support for the verdict and says that the punishment of the leaders is in accordance to the law.
I would also like to remind people from other countries who make biased or even groundless interpretations saying this decision is harmful to Hong Kong's freedoms. That's made without reason and without factual basis.
Former Governor Chris Patten also weighed in on the verdict and said it was appallingly divisive to use anachronistic common law charges in a vengeful pursuit of political events, which took place in 2014.
Well, for more on today's verdict, earlier I sat down with democracy activist Joshua Wong.
I'm not really shocked by all of the verdict, but even retired Pastor Zhu, 74 years old, might face jail sentence.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to imagine what kind of situation will they face, or is it possible for them to overcome certain situation inside the jail. As the one being locked up in prison, I would say that all of us participate in the umbrella movement expect to pay the price. But the charges used by the government is really ironic and hard to understand, and I just recognize it as to a political prosecution.
What would you say to the so-called Umbrella 9, given that you yourself has been also in prison facing charges to do with Occupy? What would you say to them?
I have been jailed twice and still have certain court cases might be jailed again 1 or 2 weeks later. Perhaps I might meet them in prison. If just need to say a few words to them, even they have not yet know the final result of the jail terms, I would encourage them, even they can lock up us in the prison, they can't lock up our mind. And I believe for those legal scholars, sociology professors, religious leader or barrister, when they are in prison, they can just let more people inside prison and around the world to know that what's going on in Hong Kong. How come this kind of professionals is willing to pay the price and to fight for free election in Hong Kong? And it's just already. And again, to prove that how the one country, two system in Hong Kong is far away from our expectation and turn to a one country, one and a half system, court just become the tools for government to suppress on freedom of expression and freedom of protest.
Acting Chief Executive Matthew Jones said he won't respond to speculation on the central government's plans for Article 23. However, he added the government still plans to legislate the controversial bill. Plans to pass the bill, which prohibits any acts of treason against the central government, caused massive protests in 2003 and has not been reintroduced ever since.
The SAR government has a constitutional responsibility to legislate Article 23 of the Basic Law. This is very clear. The Basic Law also has requirements and regulations, and legislation is only a matter of time. The Chief Executive has repeatedly said that we can only begin the process at an appropriate time, because the process is complicated and sensitive. But it doesn't mean we haven't been following up on the matter.
Meanwhile, Zheng also weighed in on a court ruling that set restrictions on Indigenous land rights in the new territories. Some 900 hectares of public land reserved for Indigenous villages to build houses could possibly be released for public development. But Zheng said even if the land is released, the potential of developing them are low. As the plots are too scattered, he said the government may appeal the verdict. To the latest on the measles outbreak in Hong Kong, a 23-year-old woman has contracted the virus, taking the total number of cases to 62. She sought medical attention at the emergency rooms at Queen Elizabeth Hospital after developing a rash on Friday and was discharged with home isolation. The woman had a good health record and was reported to have received a vaccine. She hadn't travelled outside the city during the incubation period. Well, police say more Hong Kongers are falling victim to a WhatsApp scam, luring users to buy and sell point cards for online games. Nearly 600 such cases were reported last year. That's a huge jump from the 42 reported cases in 2017. Scammers are hijacking people's accounts, pretending to be them, and deceiving friends and family into buying credit for online games from convenience stores. After receiving passwords from the so-called point cards, scammers sell them online for a profit. One man lost $430,000 to the scam. Police say no suspects have been arrested. Authorities suggest setting up a two-step verification process on the app. Coming up next, the latest from the world of business. We start with a look at the stock markets in Greater China. There wasn't a lot of movement today here in Hong Kong. The Hang Seng edged up only 0.3% to close at 30,157 points. Healthcare shares continue to gain here, though, while property firms were also in focus for investors. In Shanghai, the composite index closed down 0.2% at 3,239 points. Worries about US trade talks and upcoming data dented any optimism over possible government support measures expected soon. Well, Sony could be set for another shake-up after an activist hedge fund started repurchasing the Japanese firm's shares again. Third Point is building its stake in Sony to try and push for changes that could include selling off some businesses. It would be the second time in 6 years that Third Point has targeted Sony. Justin Solomon has the details.
Shares in Sony surged on Tuesday in Tokyo after a Reuters report that an activist fund was aiming for a second push for change in the Japanese company. Its stocks rallied to a 3-week high in early trade. Reuters cited sources in a Monday report that Third Point, led by activist investor Daniel Loeb, is targeting up to $1 billion to buy Sony shares. It would be the second attempt in 6 years for Loeb's fund, which has $14 billion in assets under management. A source told Reuters that the fund wants Sony to explore options for some of its business units, including its movie studio, which Third Point believes could be a takeover target. The news comes as Sony's gaming business is slowing down and its PlayStation 4 console nears the end of its life cycle. However, Sony chief executive Kenichiro Yoshida sees movies and music as central to revenue growth. Third Point last exited a stake in Sony in 2014 after a roughly 20% gain on its investment. That came after a year and a half of pushing Sony to spin off its entertainment division. That call was rejected by Yoshida's predecessor, Kazuo Hirai.
Australian casino giant Crown Resorts said it received a $7.1 billion takeover offer from Las Vegas Wynn Resorts, sending its shares soaring over 20% in afternoon trade in Sydney. The talks are in their early stages, though, and Crown said that no agreement has been reached on value or structure. The sale, which could be Australia's biggest M&A deal this year, would mark an end to Crown owner James Packer's 12-year foray into the world of casinos. He already stepped down as a board member last year due to mental illness. The deal could likely give one of the world's biggest casino companies a foothold in the Australian market, which is popular with Chinese tourists. Well, time for a break now, but do stay with us. Up next, the US labels Iran's elite Revolutionary Guards as a foreign terrorist organisation. We'll have the details for you in just a moment.
It's a very unique place.
You can speak what you want, you can dress what you want.
I think the spirit is always there.
我唔覺得係樂觀，我覺得係我唔服輸嘅心態。我想證明俾你睇，我得咯。
I used to cry at night.
香港好多好人嘅，我覺得。
I just fell in love with the place. I mean, local Chinese people, they go away. Very often, they're very happy to come back. I mean, it is a home. It is my home.
That's why I feel Hong Kong is home.
點都有啲屋企嘅感覺㗎嘛。
Anyone can wear the mask. Visual experience like none other won both Golden Globe and Oscar nods. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Available on Now Video Express. Rent and watch right away with Now TV set-top box. And check out what's hot on Channel 106. Call us or log on to our website for details. Hollywood special effects experts. Giving scientific treatment to myths, tall tales, and urban legends. The most hotly debated internet myths. The ultimate brain teaser with a hefty dose of science and engineering.
That was totally amazing.
Taking experiments to the extreme. Debunking urban legends by directly testing them. Mythbusters. Wednesday and Thursday nights at 8:30 on View TV 6. Attention everyone.
My name's Ben Hanley and I'm a magician.
Poses as different types of people with his crafty hidden cameras and sensational magic stunts.
Oh my god!
Oh my gosh! How did you do that? How did you do that?
That was wicked, mate. One of the most terrifying experiences of my life.
Mind-bending tricks right in front of your eyes.
Totally tricked. Totally.
Tricked. Friday night at 9:30 on View TV 6. Based on the international bestseller. Smartly unpredictable. Dark and compelling.
Why did you kill him?
I don't know.
The question is not what happened.
You lied to me the whole time.
No history of mental illness. The question is, why?
The mind plays tricks. He recognized her.
Is there something wrong with me?
Hit TV series starring Jessica Biel and Bill Pullman. The Sinner. Saturday night at 10 on View TV 6. Great action star. Legendary bodybuilder. Once the governor of California.
So who are you, man?
I'm the party pooper.
Arnold Schwarzenegger is the man.
Don't worry, everything is under control.
But what is his Achilles heel? The little ones. Ouch! Theatre 96, Kindergarten Cop. Sunday nights at 9 on View TV 6.
Welcome back. British Prime Minister Theresa May is meeting with the leaders of France and Germany for key talks on Brexit ahead of an EU summit later this week. With little sign of a resolution in London, May dashed to Berlin to seek support for her request to delay Brexit a second time from April the 12th to June the 30th. She is due to meet French President Emmanuel Macron later on. Back at home, the government will hold talks of their own with the opposition to try and figure out a deal that could get through Parliament. Michelle Hennessy has the details.
An emergency EU summit on Wednesday will decide if the bloc is ready to grant that extension. If any of the other 27 member states veto that decision, Britain will break away on Friday night without a deal. While she courts France and Germany, back home her Conservative ministers will be holding crisis talks with the opposition. May sparked uproar with some lawmakers in her own party by announcing the talks with their rivals in Parliament. Her aim is to end the deadlock over her Brexit plan, which has already been rejected 3 times by lawmakers. But the Labour Party wants to keep Britain in a closer relationship with the bloc than many Conservatives would want.
The problem is that the government doesn't seem to be moving off the original red lines.
Her talks with Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn are yet to amount to anything meaningful.
The ayes have it.
And in a further blow to May, lawmakers on Monday approved a bill that goes against the wishes of her government. It gives lawmakers the chance to make legally binding changes to May's requested departure date. She asked the EU to delay Brexit until June 30th. The government will now be forced to hold a debate on that, which is scheduled for Tuesday. And while May does still have some freedom to agree a different date with the EU, the passage of the bill overturns the balance of power in British politics.
This bill is telling our Prime Minister what to do. Classic case of the tail wagging the dog. Constitutional chaos.
The government usually has sole control over the Parliament's agenda and control over what laws are passed. It's highlighting once again a deeply divided Parliament in a deeply divided country, which could undermine May's attempts to prove to the EU that she can get a majority agreement back home.
And in Milan, Europe's nationalist anti-immigrant parties gathered on Monday, brought together by Italian Deputy Prime Minister Matteo Salvini. Salvini is looking to unite the groups ahead of EU elections in May, but he has quite the challenge ahead of him. Francis Maguire reports.
Nationalist and far-right political parties from across the European Union are trying to set up a new unified voting bloc in EU Parliament. This summit in Milan, they hope, will set the stage before Parliament's elections in May. If successful, they hope to have a major say in how the continent is run, for the first time since the EU was formed 60 years ago.
La notizia è che stiamo allargando.
Today, for many citizens and many people, the European Union is a nightmare, not a dream. We are working to bring work, family, safety, environmental protection and the future for young people at the center of the debate.
Italy's Deputy Prime Minister Matteo Salvini organised the event. Finding unity among these disparate parties has been difficult in the past. While they generally share anti-immigration sentiments, on other subjects such as social programmes and economic policies, there are often wide differences. For example, although Salvini is seen as a driving force in trying to forge alliances, the Alternative for Germany party has previously denounced Italy's big budget spending plans. There were also 2 notable no-shows. It's not known if Poland's ruling Law and Justice Party or their tight ally, Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban, are willing to join the group.
US President Donald Trump's revolving door in Washington has seen yet another departure. That's after he allegedly fired the director of the US Secret Service. According to a report by CNN, the firing of Randolph Allers was described by one administration official as a near systematic purge at the Department of Homeland Security. It follows the exit of his boss and Homeland Security Secretary, Kirstjen Nielsen, who quit Sunday night. While neither Trump nor the White House have explained the sudden departures, Trump has clashed with Nielsen over immigration policies. And overnight in the US, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has designated Iran's military as a foreign terrorist group. It's a move seen by many as an unprecedented step that could raise tensions in the Middle East. Zachary Goldman reports.
Today, the United States is continuing to build its maximum pressure campaign against the Iranian regime.
In an unprecedented move, the U.S. State Department on Monday said it would label Iran's elite Revolutionary Guards Corps a foreign terrorist organization. It's the first time Washington has formally designated another country's military a terrorist group.
We're doing it because the Iranian regime's use of terrorism as a tool of statecraft makes it fundamentally different from any other government.
The IRGC is Iran's most powerful security force. Designating it as a foreign terror group is meant to hamper its ability to move money and operate internationally. Since taking office, the Trump administration withdrew from a multinational nuclear deal meant to block Iran from building nuclear weapons, and it leveled sanctions against Tehran. Washington is now targeting the IRGC, which it says backs militant groups across the Middle East, from Hezbollah in Lebanon to Houthi fighters in Yemen's civil war. But critics have warned labeling the IRGC a terrorist group could complicate security matters in places such as Iraq. American troops are still on the ground there after vanquishing the Islamic State. Iranian lawmakers last week warned the nation would take reciprocal action in response to any threat to the IRGC. The U.S. designation takes effect next week.
Israelis headed to the polls today in an election that will determine if Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu retains his grip on power. Emily Wither reports.
He's dominated politics for a generation. But as Israelis cast their ballots in national elections, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is fighting for political survival. Tuesday's vote is the closest fought election the country has seen for years, featuring bold promises, smear campaigns and controversial party ads. Israelis are choosing among party lists of candidates to serve in the 120-seat Knesset, but no party here has ever won a majority of seats. So after the vote, the coalition calculations begin. If re-elected, Netanyahu will also be crowned Israel's longest-serving prime minister. But not only is he facing corruption charges, he also has his toughest competitor in years. Final polls showed Netanyahu falling behind his main challenger, centrist Benny Gantz. However, when it comes to forming a government, Netanyahu still has an easier path. With polls predicting that Gantz, who is likely to win the support of centre-left and left-wing parties, will fall short of a governing majority in parliament. And this guy could be kingmaker. Far-right politician Moshe Feiglin. He's campaigned on a heady mix of marijuana legislation and the annexation of the occupied West Bank, and says when it comes to a coalition, he has no preference between Netanyahu or Gantz. The outcome of these bitterly fought elections might not be known for weeks, with looming criminal indictments casting a cloud over one of Israel's most powerful leaders.
OK, time now for a look at what's been happening in the world of sports. Premier League action first, and a masterclass from Chelsea's Eden Hazard, who helped secure 3 points for the Blues over rivals West Ham. Hazard scored both goals in the 2-0 victory at Stamford Bridge, with the first in particular a dazzling solo effort. Chelsea fans, though, will be wondering how much longer they can count on the Belgians' magic to rescue them. Real Madrid are reportedly lining up a huge offer to tempt Hazard to the Bernabeu next season. Well, attention turns now to the Champions League this evening, where it's an all-Premier League affair between Manchester City and Tottenham Hotspur. City striker Sergio Aguero has reportedly shaken off a muscle injury and could return to action in the quarter-final first leg at the Etihad Stadium. Spurs have promised to fly out of the blocks against the Citizens to try and seize an advantage in the tie. Much attention will be on Danny Rose and Raheem Sterling as well, with both players among those speaking out against racism in football over the last few weeks following several incidents across Europe.
My mum has taught me how to love myself and how to love my skin colour and how to be comfortable with my skin colour. I wouldn't personally agree with it because I think at the end of the day, to try and go out and win the game, if it's going on at the moment, I think that will hurt them even more. They're only trying to get you down, you know, and if you do walk off the pitch as a group, that kind of makes them win. So, you know, to either score a goal or win the match, I think that's even a better feeling that beats them.
Well, the other quarter-final match this evening in the competition sees last year's finalists Liverpool face a resurgent Porto side at Anfield. Porto boss Sergio Conceição has vowed not to let last year's 5-0 drubbing at the hands of the Reds overshadow this year's showdown. Liverpool's manager Jurgen Klopp has also said the 2018 match should have no bearing on the tie and called on his players to respect Porto.
That can be a bit of a wild game because they are really good in pressing and counter-pressing. They do that really well, are really well organized. They cross early, bring the bodies in a box, offensively, physically really strong, creative in midfield, experienced and young. fullbacks, good crossers, all that stuff. So there's a lot to expect then.
Turning to golf, as arguably the biggest competition in the sport counts down to tee off later this week at the Masters in Georgia. World number one Justin Rose has been widely touted as the favourite to don the green jacket at August National. He said he's keeping his head down even as others focus on the history of the competition.
I've had enough good golf to give me confidence, and I've had enough poor golf to keep me working hard, which is kind of sometimes a good place to be as well, because, you know, if the game comes sometimes too easily and results are just happening, you can sometimes, you don't get lazy by any means, but you don't quite know where the next level for improvement is.
OK, that's it for now. Do make sure you join us again tomorrow night for all the stories shaping your world. Bye for now.
Coming up next, 2020. Living in the middle of nowhere. A working class family, struggling with bills.
Are we like poor now? We're not poor, we're just thrifty.
Worrying about work. Watching the kids grow up.
We're screwed!
Bring it on.
Am I a horrible mother?
Too soon to tell.
Surviving a life that you and I can identify